We have one item on our agenda this evening, and is for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. Councilmember Souza is still ill. However, he's recovering. He's at home. He will not be here this evening. And Councilmember Osborne is busy on her personal, obviously her commercial business as a jeweler. She may be able to make the council meeting, but will not make the work session. Before we do the item for discussion, we do have one administrative item. Lynn?
I'd just like to announce for folks that are watching our video, we have issues tonight, and there is only audio available, so anybody watching at home on their computer will only see snow. They'll be able to hear it, but they will not be able to see anything.
It's the holidays.
Yeah, holidays, that's all. Yeah.
How appropriate.
It's probably the best we've looked all year.
Why is she sitting here? I don't know.
Had to pay extra to get it to work.
Why don't you say it louder so everybody can hear?
Oh, I took care of it.
Romina credits it to the holidays, so the snow. All right, you're up, Romina.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, Steve Block, who's here from Block Communications, is going to kind of walk us through our past year of our federal contract. As you know, about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, we went out and hired federal lobbyists to help us with our agenda. And so we wanted to give you the opportunity to, give you a year in review, tell you everything we've been doing, and then kind of give you what we're looking forward to in the next year. And I believe on the phone also we have Christopher Minikowski, who is our federal, he's in D.C., and so he's on the phone to answer any kind of specific questions where if we can't answer them here, he's there available to us, so he's also there. I think he's on mute, but he's listening in. So if you have any questions for him, he's also there. I'm going to turn it over to Steve so we can kind of rush through.
Would you make sure he's connected?
I think
Are you there,
Christopher? Are you
Christopher?
there? I think Jeff connected him right before the meeting.
I am here, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very good. Thank you, Romina and Mr. Mayor and members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here. On behalf of my firm and also Alcalde and Fay, we started about a year ago, and I'm going to quickly walk through what we've done and what we intend to do in 2010. I realize we're under a fairly tight time frame, and we want to make sure that we allow plenty of time for questions and answers and comments and the like. So with that said, I'll just jump into it if that's okay with all of you. And is it okay? Good. Thank you. Yeah. Very good. So just quickly, our team in Washington consists of Chris Minikowski, who's on the line, Susan Isold, Jennifer Hirschberg, and Nicole Boer, and my firm, Block Communications, here in Arizona. Alcalde and Fay is, I can say this because there's someone else there, the leading municipal lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., and together we have sort of a local federal presence for the city of Goodyear. We were originally retained to help to focus on transportation infrastructure matters, but this year has been anything but as anticipated. So we've switched gears a little and are still doing that, but we're also looking at some of the federal stimulus grants and other opportunities that have become available since we first came on board. Next, please. So basically, we have essentially a three-part approach to serving you. We have an assessment period, kind of a strategic design period, and then our implementation. Again, we do that with a local presence as well as a federal presence. So we have people on the ground in Washington who are experts at appropriations and transportation infrastructure. And because it's important for the delegation to hear locally and to make sure that we have our eyes and ears open in Arizona, we also have that covered for you as well. Next, please. Thank you. So let's see. This year has been characterized by really a highly partisan environment, which has slowed down the agenda. There's not been a lot of spirit of compromise and cooperation between the two opposing parties. In addition, we've had an economic crisis that everyone is more than familiar with. And finally, the legislative calendar has been dominated by these massive bills that have really sucked all the air out of the room and prevented the members who had intended to pursue legislation that we were most interested in from pursuing it with any measurable progress this year. I also, the last bullet there, you can see that we've been operating under continuing resolutions. That's what happens when Congress doesn't get its job done. They have to pass these quick fixes in order to make sure the federal government stays funded. Next, please. This has been widely reported. A large amount of the Recovery Act funds have not been expended. And a lot of the funds have, frankly, it's been a little bit of a disappointment, I think, for a lot of the municipal governments and county governments. It's been slow to come out, and when it has, it's been formulaic in nature. And so less has been spent than had been hoped. And you can see in the last bullet there, we use as an example the Tiger grants. Those are the transportation investment grants that they had over 1,300 requests for those. They only have $1.5 billion, and $57 billion is the total of the requests. So you can see the problem we're working with there. Next, please. And so I mentioned before that these major bills have languished. This is now dated information. It says only 5 bills have been signed by the President. Actually, that's still technically true, but last night you may have seen that they passed in an omnibus bill 6 of the 12 appropriations bills. You may note if there are 12 appropriations bills and they passed 6 last night and 5 have already been signed into law, that leaves one appropriations bill missing. That would be the defense appropriations bill. And the reason that has been left out is because that's going to be included in a larger omnibus bill that may include an increase in the debt ceiling. So I'll leave to your good judgment as to why the defense appropriations bill has been left out and will be included in a larger debt ceiling increase. But that is what's going on. And then you can also see that both the Safety Lou, the Transportation Authorization Bill, which we think holds great promise for Goodyear, and also the WRDA bill, the Water Reauthorization Bill, have gone nowhere this year. 2010 appropriations, that's this year. The fiscal year started October 1, so we pursued those 3 projects. We moved the ball downfield, pardon the football analogy, but it is Monday night like football here shortly. And we moved the ball downfield this year and feel like we're well positioned for next year when we don't think it'll be quite as strange a year with the stimulus funds and everything else going on in that sense. Next. So I mentioned the Transportation Reauthorization Bill. You can see the projects that we are pursuing there. And again, we think that next year there'll be 2 things that you should be aware of that are happening. There's going to be a patchwork bill that where they're going to spend $150 billion to $400 billion. And we are in conversations now with key people on that. In addition, there'll be a longer-term reauthorization bill. It'll probably occur late in 2010. And so we're looking at sort of 2 bites at the apple there to try to get funding for these key projects that you can see on the page. I think I alluded to this, but if it wasn't clear, I'll make it clear now. So the reauthorization bill died. It doesn't exist. There'll be a new bill next session. The good news is that Chairman Overstar has committed to having a transportation reauthorization bill and also to having a WRDA bill. It's an election year, and we fully expect both of those to go through the Congress. I'd be really surprised if there were not bills for each of those in water and in transportation authorization. Some other things we've been working on.
Okay.
We caught up? Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been looking, there's been a lot of grant activity. There are grant alerts that are sent to the city. We've been trying to generally position the city of Goodyear with the delegation. And we've been looking at opportunities. We've had some discussions with various agencies, and Romina can speak to this in detail, but we've pursued various grant opportunities as well. And just more general activity, key stakeholders. There are a number of groups like the League of Cities, look at Air Force Base activity that we keep our eyes and ears open and try to make sure that Goodyear has a constant presence in Washington. When you're not there on a daily basis, it can pose a real problem. The year ahead, how are we doing on time? So as I mentioned, basically we're going to have the 3 most important things for you to know here are there'll be the normal appropriations bills. And we're looking at transportation, energy and water, education for opportunities. The second is the Transportation Reauthorization Bill. which I spoke about, and then there's the water reauthorization bill. Those are the big three. We're still not taking our eyes off the stimulus money. There may be another stimulus in the grant process, but those tend to be formulaic again and less targeted for the type of projects we want to pursue. I think I've already covered this, so I will skip this.
Okay.
And I've covered most of this as well. Mentioned Chairman Overstar and his desire to see a bill. There are going to be all sorts of other funding opportunities, especially programs like the ones Goodyear have that can go quick to market, so to speak, where they can employ people. They can there's not a long lead time. As you know, that anything that can create jobs quickly is going to have appeal among the public policy leaders in Washington. I was going to spend several hours on this slide, but it was just to give you a sense of the appropriations process. So let me summarize it in 30 seconds. It's a mess. Now, basically what happens. Did I hit that?
No, sorry.
You want to go back?
No, it won't. You're over there.
Can you go back?
Yeah, there you go. Throw you off with that change.
Right. So the way the cycle works is in the beginning in January, the members begin receiving requests from various constituents and stakeholders. That's roughly a 3-month process. Then they put together what are called wish list letters. Those go up in April to the committees. Then the chair and other members of the 12 appropriation subcommittees put together essentially their bills, and it starts winding its way through the process. Hopefully ending up in the fall. In election years, they usually try to finish. They'd like to finish in the early fall so they can go back home and do their thing. So that is it for the prepared remarks that we have. Chris, did I miss anything before we go to questions and comments and insults?
No, I don't think so.
I just want to go over a little bit as a recap from our end, staff end. If you remember a year ago, we came in and we had a list of those projects which are in the presentation, and council approved that as the federal agenda. A lot has changed since then for our city and frankly in our project list, because we have, through staff and through other funding efforts, have funded a few of those projects or in the process of funding a few of those projects either through MAG or through other federal funds or through grant opportunities. And so what we're going to do internally before the next round of appropriations and next year's efforts is we will come back with a new federal agenda for council that will outline the updates of what we have funded from the past list and probably bring you a new list of projects based on what our needs are currently. It's a little bit different than what we were doing last year. And so there will be a reprioritization of where we will be in the next year, which we'll then give to our federal team as soon as we're prepared internally with the city with that. So you guys should be seeing that probably in the first half of next year, probably January.
Mr. Mayor, any questions?
Questions or comments? Yes. Frank?
Where are you going to start? The word on the street is that there's stimulus money in this stimulus package that hasn't been used by other states, and it's available, and that I don't know how true that is. This is what you get on the news. But is that stimulus money available to us, and is there a chance for us to get some, especially in transportation?
Let me answer what we know from the MAG portion of that. What happens, Councilman Cavalier, is that there's deadlines that have to be met. All of the states have a deadline of when projects need to obligate. And so when that deadline is met, the states that have not obligated the money is supposedly supposed to go back into a coffer, and the federal government is supposed to redistribute that money to the states that have obligated that. We don't know how many states will be in the situation where those funds are not obligated. Frankly, there's probably plenty of money in Arizona that may not make that obligation date based on where we are in project lists. And so we won't know if Arizona is going to be one of those states that is able to go into the second round of stimulus money. That's something that we'll be able to see later. But it will be, again, if we are, it will again come through probably the same way that it came in the first time, which is formula funding. So if it does come through Arizona, it'll again be discussed in the MAG and in the CAG and all the other areas, and there'll be another formula fund that will be allocated locally. So we won't know that for some time.
And as Steve mentioned, 80% of the money is not spent yet.
Right.
Yes, I realize that.
Yeah. So it could be an issue, and frankly, I'm not sure that Arizona is going to be a state that is going to be ready to accept a second round. We won't know that until after the obligations have been met.
Thank you.
right now, it seems like a priority is jobs that they're pushing out there right now. From a criteria standpoint, what's on the table, what's off the table? And I guess the reason why I'm asking is, say, for example, if the city has some already shovel-ready projects that require capital infrastructure, buildings. Is there certain things they would be, amenable to, not amenable to? Say, for example, education facilities, that type of thing, that we could, put in for that type of, project? And if so, how does that work? Please educate me. Does it have to go from us to the state, and then to the state to the feds? And, kind of give me a...
Well, I mean, I think if we're talking about the city center project, for instance, what will have to happen is we're probably not going to qualify for stimulus money for city center, because stimulus money is so formulaic and is so pinpointed at certain projects, unless there's a second round of stimulus that has some sort of other outlines or other kinds of guidelines that we're going to be using. So the best way to go after projects for city center would be through the appropriations process, which is why it was so important to understand how the appropriations process works, because it is just going to start in January. And so if we do decide as a city that that is something that we want to go after, what we're technically doing is asking for capital money or capital infrastructure money and tagging it somewhere in the appropriations process. And that request would go directly from the city, and there's forms that we fill out. It's literally forms that you fill out. You send your congressional members, and your congressional members then, we go out there as a team and we go out and discuss that ask from and that's where our federal team comes into hand. They walk us through that process, but it doesn't go to the state and then to Congress. It goes directly from us to them.
So let me just clarify that then. If you can, again, jobs being a priority, if you can show that it's shovel-ready and creates X amount of jobs, does that help us in the process? Or, I mean, how does that work as far as trying to convince them that, we should be ahead of somebody else or to get the money? I mean, what's the key in that type of thing?
I mean, that's one factor. There's been so much talk about shovel-readiness. There are a number of shovel-ready projects that were never funded, and that won't be funded.
No, I'm sure.
So yeah, so it's a factor. It's an important factor. But then the formulas that they've devised, some of them help us, some of them hurt us. We think when we look at if you think about it as appropriations, authorizing, and stimulus, and those three, we think the most promising will be authorizing, followed by appropriations, and we put stimulus third, because of the formulaic nature of it, and because of how slow the money is being dispersed and some of the problems associated with that program. In the case of the infrastructure, the reauthorization bill, in a perfect world, we go through the authorizing committee, because then the activity, we're more likely to get support from our delegation if it's authorized, and it takes a little longer, but then once you have authorizing legislation, you can count on your chances of out-year funding and support are much greater. I mean, it's a little longer process, but in the long term, it's the best way to go. Again, the appropriation cycle is annual, and we think there will be some really good opportunities there, especially to your point, where we can make the case that we've got people, we can put a shovel in the ground and start, in 30 days or 60 days, we can actually employ people doing the work. So I think that's still a really important factor here. It's not the sole factor, but a really important one. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I interject a question on that same line? So basically, the job stimulus is construction work. So that's what's going to do it, is that construction work, that's the big stimulus program that's going to provide jobs.
Probably road construction more than anything,
So
though.
that means that's what we say to our citizens. Citizens, this program will get you construction jobs. Is that what is coming out of Washington?
I'm talking about the stimulus. It's stimulus only.
I just want to clarify that.
It was designed. I mean, I think it was designed. It was designed for that purpose, and I think it was designed for jobs, and especially jobs for infrastructure type programs. That was sort of the top of the.
I just think it's odd because I know the transition for people who have lost their jobs. I'm not sure the construction is the transition, but I just wanted you to clarify that for me.
Point,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Well, I mean, not in defense of the stimulus package per se, but in defense of that notion that they're just construction jobs. Keep in mind, there's engineers, architects, electrical engineers.
But the
There's
bulk.
a bulk of it's construction, but there are a number of other professional degreed professionals that are out there that are in well-paid roles that are funded through that package.
I would say, in theory, they're construction. I mean,
In theory. It's construction projects, and construction projects come with the majority of it being construction, blue-collar type jobs.
So it isn't designed to get capital items. For instance, if you need a new fleet of buses, it will not be designed for something like that. Is
Well,
that-
it could possibly through I mean, that would all depend on how our state decides and how our region decides to spend the stimulus, which we did at our PTA. There was, we decided there was a priority list, and some of that can be used, yes, to purchase buses, but that would be depending on our region and how we want to spend it. There's a percentage of it now also that you can use for operations and maintenance of fleet for buses.
That was the problem we had with our PTA. was
Right,
that
and so
most
that
of this
changed,
could not be
actually.
used.
Initially, that wasn't the intention of the stimulus, but, rules change in
Oh, yeah.
Washington, and so you come down the pipeline a few months later, and now they say, okay, now a percentage of it can be used for operations and maintenance, which we have directed a certain percent of it in the region to do that.
You just can't buy tractors from Russia or something like that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, you may recall that they moved very quickly on the stimulus bill, and so this is more art than science in terms of the way it's played out.
Well, that's your job, it's more art than science.
We like
I
art.
guess.
As far as our appropriation requests next year, I mean, city center obviously is a hot topic, but I don't necessarily realistically think the feds are going to fund a city hall, city center type of a project. But there are other projects that are on our capital improvement program that are taking the place of that allocation of local dollars, i.e. the 911 upgrade.
We have
those sort of things. You're keeping those on.
Absolutely. Actually, we have already turned in requests for the police and fire radio upgrade.
Because I think the public safety stuff tends to get a bit more traction on Capitol Hill.
Yeah,
than
we
city
actually
center.
took the list of the projects that you all had approved as priorities the few months ago when we were discussing the city center. We took those projects and we've put white papers together, and we've turned a few of those in already to congressional members to take a look at so that we can start getting some feedback on some of the other stuff that's using up that revenue that we need to build the city center.
Are you still looking at the other, the projects we didn't put up at the top of the list in case you say it's ever-changing?
We do. We continually, and that's what's been frustrating, is because the environment is continually changing out there, and there's money going through these programs that, we'll get a daily update sometimes from DC. Chris will send us stuff that says, okay, money's coming down this pipeline. You guys, you must have a project to fit this. And so sometimes it's a project that it's been way down here, and all of a sudden it fits the criteria. And if it fits it, we send it in. And you just kind of throw it and see where it sticks, because so many things that are coming down daily that we just try to adjust as best as we
Like
can.
police and fire administration building or public works?
We've looked. We're looking. Everything we do. I mean, these guys have been absolutely fantastic with being flexible. I send them emails every day saying, "Can we do this? Can we do that?" And they're always looking at opportunities for funding for all of our stuff.
And I guess you were alluding to the slowdown has really been the healthcare program and the attachment of the armed forces funding for the war is being put on that same bill. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's not the reason for the slowdown. I would say the stimulus bill and all the activities surrounding it, the healthcare legislation, the cap and trade and energy bill. There were multiple energy bills. There was a House version. There were several Senate versions. So I would say all the cap and trade. Those are the large bills that have really taken away the time that's needed to do the transportation infrastructure bill and the water reauthorization bill. Those are and in fact, they just barely, they just passed the omnibus appropriations bill. Normally, they finish 12 bills by the early fall, but they were running into a deadline. So that shows you how far behind they were, just because of the bigger issues they've been dealing with. But it's been kind of a slow year from that standpoint. But there is definitely a motive and an opportunity and a strong leadership in getting these bills passed next year. We'd be very surprised if there wasn't at least a transportation infrastructure patch bill and then a WRDA bill as well.
I had heard they were slowing down that, appropriations bill for the military because they want to piggyback the debt service limit because they don't want it to be an election issue. So they're trying to raise it enough so they can stay within that limit come the 2010 election so it doesn't distract those that have to do it around that time. So
Chris and I were just talking about that, and I don't know if you have any more information on it, but basically we heard that there were 177 Republicans in the House, and we heard that 174 of them said they won't support the debt service increase with the defense appropriations bill. So what that means, we don't know at this point, and whether that rumor is true, we don't know either. But but what you have is they pulled that bill out to put it on to an unpopular vote, which would be the increase of nearly $2 trillion to make it, I think it was over 14, make it over 14 trillion in the amount of money that the federal government can borrow. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch if you like good political theater.
On the stimulus monies, we've spent apparently, or we have not spent 70 or 80% of the available stimulus monies. It's very hard to spend it. It's formula-based. What is being stimulated, and why is there a second one being considered?
Be honest.
You want that, Romina?
Well, I honestly don't think that the stimulus, obviously the intentions of the stimulus were not to, well, some people say that it was done on purpose this way because it gets caught up in red tape and therefore the money doesn't actually get spent and it was more of a political play than anything else. And the other half will tell you that they had no idea that this was going to get caught behind so much red tape, and so nobody was really prepared for the outcome of the stimulus. So it's the conspiracy theory versus the others. As far as the second stimulus, the first one, according to the administration, was successful. Where they come up with their money and where they come up with their numbers, I have no idea. But that is the move, that they're saying that the stimulus has worked. It has tapered off unemployment. It hasn't gone down. In fact, it's gone, it hasn't gone up. It's gone down maybe a half a point since then.
Gone up a couple percentage points.
It's all in how you twist it.
10 right now, I think.
Yeah, we're down to 10. We
Yeah,
were
we're
at 10
down to
point.
10.
Right.
Wow,
It was at what,
congratulations.
10.5 or whatever, and now we're down to 10. So if the stimulus had not been passed, it would have been worse. And so they think a second one that focuses on infrastructure jobs, which the first one focused on infrastructure jobs, will do the trick to get us to turn. Now, again, it's all rhetoric, so believe what you want. The first one, we're at the bottom of the tank on the first one. I mean, municipalities are the receiving end. We're the last organization to receive the stimulus money to put it out on the streets. We have yet to receive anything to go out there. So if you're talking to citizens, we're the front line. It's the cities that are the front line of spending this money, and we have yet to receive anything to spend. And so that alone should tell you how effective this was. Because you guys haven't authorized anything for us to spend.
What was the Yuma Bridge? Was that TARP money or a stimulus?
No, that was MAG money. That's MAG money. The design?
I thought we received some federal money.
We did. We received
For the design.
we received federal money, stimulus money for the park and ride. And then we received a formula allocation which will be used for paving Yuma Road, which we have not done yet because we're not through the ADOT process.
That was through.
Right, that's through the MAG allocation, through the formula funding, but it's stimulus money.
So it's interesting, California, Arizona are having the worst time of anybody, and they're getting the less funding. It's not going west. Is that what we're saying? Do they think we're going to find another gold mine here?
Not so far. Yeah.
It's very disconcerting.
It is.
Probably political.
How realistic is the move of some of that money into the Tiger Grant application process? Is that a realistic, the $57 billion versus the 1.3 or 1.5?
$57 billion. I think the Tiger program is a potentially viable option for us. It's broad. If you read the program, I mean, it's basically infrastructure investments.
And the red tape isn't there as much as it is in other areas in terms of the decision-making process. It's at the discretion of the secretary.
Yeah, I think there's a little more discretion, but also more money for that program because of the emphasis on infrastructure and the fact that there wasn't as much spent. I don't know. So we think we've got a close eye on the Tiger Grant program. Yeah.
Well, you got a tough
Am I
job.
on, Vice Chair?
Chris?
Am I on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me just chime in quickly on Tiger. The project is very good. I've been in contact with Secretary LaHood's office promoting this project. And third is we think there's going to be a second round of Tiger Grant money simply because the amounts are so big and the amounts requested are so big. And they would like to fulfill more projects than the 1.5 billion allows. So we suspect that the first round will come out in early January, and quite possibly have a second bite of the apple after that.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Steve, thank you, Ramina. Meeting adjourned, we'll move to our council meeting.